Hey, welcome back everyone to our journey through the Bible. The the flow of our year-long readings being what they are has pulled us into this place in which we're reading of the passion of Jesus right here at the heart of Advent with just 2 weeks until we reach Christmas. In Mark's gospel, we've seen the plot against Jesus and Judas's agreement to participate in that plot. We've come through the Passover with the disciples and the institution of the Lord's Supper, and then we find ourselves in that familiar moment of Jesus praying in the garden at Gethsemane. This is the story as Mark records it in Mark 14. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took with him Peter and James and John and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, "Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." There's no question that there is something admittedly odd about focusing our attention on Jesus' prayer in the garden at this particular moment of the church year, despite their overall connectedness in the life of Jesus. There is something of a spiritual discord of reminiscing on the pending death of Jesus in this same moment that we are anticipating his birth. That Gethsemane prayer grabbed my attention this week, however, because there is a theophilosophical theme that ties that Gethsemane prayer to the Christmas story. And reading it this week reminded me once again of that pairing. Many of you have likely heard me talk about this in some way or another in the past, but there's a clear and a distinct parallel between the prayer of Jesus in the garden and the story of those who were a part of the birth of the Christ child. It really boils down to that one final line of the prayer of Jesus. "Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." Is there any echo there for you from any moment in the Christmas story? There is for me. There always has been. "Yet not what I want, but what you want," Jesus said. "Let it be to me as you have said." Remember that line? That's Mary's response to Gabriel when he visits her with the annunciation of the path that stood before her. Contrary to how we often view it, what Gabriel was announcing to Mary, we've talked about this many times, what Gabriel was announcing to Mary that night was not something that would have been seen entirely as good news. Sure, the prospect of the coming Messiah was wonderful, but through her, she was going to be a young, unwed mother. The snide remarks and castigating glances were going to be the least of her problems. And what would she say to Joseph? This wasn't a great thing in a lot of ways for her personally. This was a path of trial and tribulation that would weaken the knees of even the most faithful among us. But still, in the face of all of that potential strife, she responds, "Let it be to me as you have said." "Yet not what I want, but what you want. Let it be to me as you have said." The connection between the garden prayer and the birth of Jesus is the same connection that has run through the story of the Gospels and through the generations of the church that has followed. What Mary exemplified in that prayer that began the story of Jesus, and what Jesus echoed in that faithful prayer as he neared the pinnacle moment of his ministry on this earth, what is in both of those is the fundamental conviction of our faith that in one's ever-deepening relationship with God, it is God's will that needs to take the lead. Now, obviously, this isn't some sort of grand nugget of a theological proclamation. It's really discipleship 101. I think that particular connection between Mary at the beginning of the ministry of Jesus and then the prayer of Jesus in the garden, however, serves as a reminder of more than just the importance of the subjugation of our own wills to that of God, but as a reminder that that very notion is not only the call of our faith, but is the engine that has driven our faith for 2,000 years. For those like Mary and Joseph at the time of his birth, to the disciples of Jesus, to the earliest leaders of the church, to the generations that have followed, our faith has been driven by those who were willing to own that core command of our relationship with God. Putting the welfare of others above themselves, taking on persecution and suffering for the sake of sharing the gospel, experiencing ridicule and isolation in order to serve the good of the neglected and the oppressed. I could go on and on and on. For more than 2,000 years of our faith has not only been grounded in the command to put the will, the ways, and the work of God above our own, but our faith has been driven by the engine of those willing to actually do that. From one story to the next, think back upon those great and grand moments of flourishing faith. In our world, in our communities, look back on your own life and find those places where you saw Christianity at its best. My bet is that behind just about every one of those celebrated stories in your heart and in your mind, you can find a person who is putting God's will ahead of their own. So no, it's not some earth-shattering proclamation of faith, but it is, I think, a little something for us to think about as we consider his birth and his death and everything that was between and everything that has been since, but perhaps most importantly of all, something to think about when we consider everything that in our lives is still yet to be. Let's be in prayer together. God, show us your ways. Break through the noise that envelops us. Come through the distractions that tear us away, God, and show us where your will needs to take our lead. Give us the wisdom to see, the faith to follow. For we prayed in his name. Amen. As always, I'm so privileged to have this time with you. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday here at noon as we continue our journey through the Bible. Have a wonderful afternoon.